few nights ago, while trapped in this awful quarantine from hell, my cat and I decided to watch Fury Road, which is hands down the weirdest movie I think that I have ever seen, but it did leave one incredibly important question to be answered. Am I allowed to cut off my arm and replace it with a Furiosa-style robot arm? So the answer to that is complicated, and there's a lot to unpack. So we need to start, I think, first with the background to it. So there's currently a body modification movement already in place, and they're primarily known as the grinder culture. The grinder culture relies mostly on biohacking, which is the act of augmenting your pre-existing organic body with sort of technological improvements. They rely mostly on open source transhumanism, which is to say that they are not waiting for professional sort of authorized approval of their own experiments. They're just kind of going for it and implanting all sorts of fun things into themselves. The grinder culture and the general movement of biohacking grows on from sort of Nick Bostrom's kind of movement with the transhumanism and this whole advancement towards a augmented human being. Yeah, so the next part of this equation that we really need to unpack is this even remotely legal? So, can I amputate my perfectly healthy arm? Now actually I did find a reasonable amount of information on this. So in the early 2000s there was actually a British doctor who did a couple of healthy amputations on limbs. Now he did it under the idea that people that he was amputating the limbs from suffered from something called body integrity identity disorder, wherein they have this obsession with being an amputee and having a limb removed. Now, his actions were described as ethically inappropriate, but not actually illegal, and no legal action was ever taken against him. So I thought that was like a fairly neat ground to work from there. However, also in the UK, body modification causing grievous bodily harm has actually been prosecuted. So the person, please don't bite me. So, body modification in the UK causing grievous bodily harm has actually been prosecuted. Now, in the context of this case, grievous bodily harm was defined by the body modder performing tongue splitting, ear removal, and nipple removal, which does lead me to believe that amputating a perfectly healthy limb would probably fall under this category. And in this case, consent was not considered an adequate defense to sort of protect that person from these charges laid by the state against them. So if you're following along here, there's kind of a little bit of a legal loophole that we found. It seems to be that amputating your arm is perfectly legal only if you can find a medically trained, officially certified doctor who's willing to perform that procedure. Is this scientifically possible? So as we've seen already with the biohackers and the grinders, we've seen some basic augmentations like magnets put under the skin, RFID chips, microchipping, that kind of thing. But I need like a full-on robot arm here, so we need to actually break down the science and see what's going on in these areas. So I did a bunch of digging and I learned all about Kevin Warwick, and he might be the coolest dude that I've ever learned about. So Kevin Warwick is a British computer engineer who is responsible for something called Project Cyborg.
We had to work with neurosurgeons. There was a team of 4 of them, and the actual operation to put the implant in place lasted just over 2 hours.
Project Cyborg is a 2-step experiment in which Warwick implanted an RFID chip into himself. So an RFID chip works something like a remote, so you can program whichever frequency your RFID chip responds to. And then with his RFID chip, he was able to control RFID compatible objects in his proximity. So we're talking lights, doors, heaters, that kind of thing. And then the second stage of his project, he was able to implant a brain gate sensor. A brain gate sensor consists of a sensor implanted in the brain and an external decoder device, which connects to some sort of prosthetic or other external object. A brain gate sensor lives inside your brain and then uses neural transmissions in order to enable it to communicate with an external device. Kevin Warwick was able to use his brain gate sensor, which was connected to an external gauntlet, so it's like a Thanos style robot arm thing. And then this gauntlet interfaced with the median nerve in Warwick's left wrist, and it actually proved detailed enough to somewhat control an external robot arm and to receive feedback from the sensors in the robot's arm's fingertips. So following on from Kevin Warwick's work, we have the MPL, which is a John Hopkins $120 million robot arm.
Even though my arm is cut off here, the nerve endings that would have went down here to work with the hand, they've been taken and re-inverted into different muscles into the stump. When you think about something, the brain, when it sends it down the nerve, it's a minute electrical charge. It comes down wherever the nerve ending ends, well then the myobands here will pick up that jiggle. With where it's at, the myoband signaling a signal down to the computer in the arm, and by doing that, then it lets the arm know just exactly what I want it to do.
And it is possibly the coolest thing in the world. The $120 million robot arm is a US Defense Department project. It's a super advanced robot arm with 26 joints, and 17 of which can be moved independently and controlled by brain stimulus. In conclusion, if I can find a medically trained doctor who is willing to amputate my arm, and if I have $120 million to spend on a highly advanced robot arm, then I can achieve my dream of having a Furiosa-inspired robot arm that will aid me in this coming apocalypse.